So at this point, and what am I, 19, 20, as I'm graduating high school, moved in with one of my best friends, got a real tiny little studio, started bringing all the jobs. I'm painting on my bedroom floor and doing illustrations and just trying to get this thing going. And the way that I started, and if I was to give any feedback as to like looking back now, like what's the way to do it? The way that I did it was this. I realized there are three different versions. Michael Gerber does a wonderful job of articulating this in his book, The E-Myth Revisited, which is, you can be an operator, you're the one doing the art. You can be a manager, you're the one managing the business. You can be an entrepreneur, the one saying, hey, here's where we're gonna go, here's what we're gonna do. Now, I played all hats though, and that's where, when you start out, you are doing everything. You are doing the bookkeeping, you're doing the art, you're doing the bookkeeping, you're paying the bills, you're making everything happen. You're running, getting your supplies. You don't have an assistant. You're just literally wearing all hats. Now, I started to get this business down in terms of my mind of realizing, okay, I've got this thing called a product, and that is the idea of creating something. So products, creativity, products around creativity, took on many different forms, and I didn't limit myself just to one. So my idea of I want to build a business, I want to build a brand. Well, what are the products within that brand and in that business? So there were a few. I was painting murals. I was painting cars. I could paint helmets. I painted shoes at Nordstrom, painting live. I went to coffee shops and painted portraits out on the porch while people were drinking coffee all day, like before Starbucks was even had like 300 stores. My whole idea was to get out in front of people, to let them know what I could do. So two of the biggest things that creatives suffer from is a lack of discipline and a lack of structure. That was in my blood very early because I realized if I wanted to have certain outcomes 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, I needed to be very disciplined and structured and strategic with my time at a very early age. And so I invested heavily into creating products, services, and branding that would go to work for me for the rest of my life. So here's a decision that you need to make as a creative. Who am I? What do I do? How do I do it? And how do I articulate it? How do I offer it? How do I let people know what it is I have to offer? And can I clearly help people articulate, or can I, as a creative, articulate clearly what it is I do and how they can work with me? And so when I would be out in public and I would be promoting, I would always let people know what it is I do and what I have to offer. And I would always have my portfolio with me, which is why your website's one of your greatest assets that you can use as a calling card, credibility, and authority builder for yourself, right? People want to see proof. People want to see reviews. People want to see who you are, what you've done. And so tracking all of that is a lot easier today than it was back in the day because I was doing it with literal photos, like, disposable cameras. It wasn't like I got a phone on me and social media and get the word out really quick. So for me, it was very analog. At first, I was living in a studio with my best friend, like above a garage, and we were just literally, it's like the size of a garage, and we split the place in two and both slept there and paid $250 in rent. And then it got to a point where I'm like, I really need a space. I really need a really cool warehouse, a space, a loft that I can live in, shower at the gym. And the reason why that happened was because just beforehand, I had met a woman at church, and this girl was, awesome, and we decided to get married. And it was very short-lived. I left on a trip, I came back, things went sideways, and it was over. It was very short-lived and very quick, but probably one of it was the second biggest trauma in my life and something that I had waited forever for and really what I wanted, but I also found my identity in it. I'm like, I wanted to have security. I wanted to have a great marriage. I wanted to have great children. I wanted to have a great family. I wanted to prove that I could do this, right? I wanted to reset my family of origin, right? And so that then, as soon as, I'm living in Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and as soon as I knew that it wasn't going to work out with her, I was homeless again. I'm like, well, there's no place to return to. I can't return. And again, there's that wound, right? Echoing back to the beginning, no place to return to. So where am I going to return? I'm going to return to myself. I'm going to return to, I got to figure this out. So saw an industrial unit, and I'm like, you know what? I don't need a house. I was so pissed. I was so upset. I was so hurt. I was mad. I was angry because I'm like, okay, everything went sideways at my church with my pastor. That whole thing was another bomb that went off. My wife leaves. That goes off. And I'm like going, F this. Time to do a reset. I want to find God on my terms. I want to find my creativity on my terms, not because what my mom says I should do or what my ex-wife says I should do or what, and dude, I'm telling you right now, I had more people chirping from the sidelines of my life telling me what I should make, how I should live, how I should operate, what I should wear, what I should do. All of that was being chirped from the sidelines, and it felt like grenades being thrown every single day. So I'm dealing with that interference while at the same time trying to grow a business. And it's like everybody's trying to pull you down and back into the bucket as you try to crawl out, right? So I move into this warehouse. I go to Home Depot. I buy a drop cloth tarp and I staple it up into like an L shape to make a little room, put a sleeping bag down on the ground. And I was as happy as a clam, man. And I'll never forget it. And I bounced around, then my best friend we shared an industrial unit. I slept on a couch up there and then another one, but it was always in Newport and Costa Mesa. And the interesting thing during that time was most would say it's the hustle. But now looking back, God was inviting me into things and taking care of his kid, even though I didn't know it at the time. And he's navigating me through these opportunities and these jobs and these customers and clients. And most would say, man, there was massive favor on you. But here I am, a believer, a guy that loves God, a guy that doesn't really know how to partner with God yet, but I just knew I loved him and I wanted him to bless me and to take care of me and to keep me safe, right? But man, did I live as if I didn't trust him and believe in him. Meaning, I went into a mode of self-made, dues paid. I went into grind, hustle, strive, upgrade, self-promotion. I became self-consumed. And my identity was completely found in my net worth. And so my self-worth found in my net worth. How much money did I have? How good is my company doing? What are my clients? Are they cool? Are they my identity? And then whatever girl I was dating at the time was a direct reflection of how cool I was. So it was great business, great relationship, great vibe, great look, great clients, and just literally what happened was I became an absolute poser. So here all this is, creativity's thriving, business is just cranking. And as things start to build, I'm like a frog in boiling water. And as I'm this frog in boiling water, I'm realizing, I think this thing owns me more than I own it. And these false identities started to come out. I started turning my business into an idol, the kind of girl I dated into an idol, unconsciously. My performance as to how much money's in the bank account became my measure of success and my barometer for success on, am I really successful and do I have what it takes? And so you spend every single day like I did. I was looking back now, and hopefully you can learn from what I've gone through and maybe check yourself on it and like thinking, are there some things I need to evaluate? Because I tell every business owner and every creative that is looking to do this, you better stop and really take measurement on where you find your purpose, where you find your identity, what you define as success. And if you are turning a lot of things that are around you into false idols out of a false sense of security, worse, take all what I just said, then add the layer of, are you living your true, authentic self? Or are you being a poser? Because, and a wonderful book to do this for you is Wild at Heart. It's based on a wound. You make a vow, and from the vow, you live a lie. And the lie is the poser. And the poser basically says this: I'm going to keep up personas and put out to the world the false self of who I want everybody to believe that I am, but on the inside, I'm dying, right? And ultimately, you're not living your true, authentic self. And a wonderful quote that one of my friends said is, he said this, he goes, when we live our true, authentic self and our creativity in that, we reflect the true nature of God. So the more that I can help myself and others step into being who God's called me to be with my creativity and my business to do it, then all of a sudden what happens is you reflect God the most. And that's what started to happen, but it took a while to get there. But the interesting thing about when moving into the studio and basically my 20s after the divorce was basically to say, I'm going to build the biggest badass company that I can do. And I want it to be self-sustaining. This is the key. I did not want to do art where I was just painting an original and selling it. I didn't want to go paint a mural and go, well, I need another mural. I didn't want to just say, oh, I painted your car, I need another car. I mean, now granted, I'm getting paid 5 to 10,000, sometimes 35,000 for a vehicle. I'm getting paid just as much for a mural. And these are absurd pricing. Like the industry as a whole was typically like, oh, a couple $100 here and a couple $100 there. But like when you have like ZZ Top and Billy F. Gibbons coming in and I want you to do an album cover, I'm like, dude, this is crazy. And then Craig T. Nelson asking me to paint his race car trailer. Like these were big numbers. We're talking like 20 and up. And back in those days, and what is that? Early 90s, it's a lot of money for a self-employed entrepreneur living in a warehouse. I started realizing I got to crack a code. And the second code was, how do I take all of this creativity and actually turn it into a system and a framework where I don't need to be present in order for me to make money? That was the next level I wanted to grow to. And what I didn't realize at the time, and I thought it was at the time in my 20s, all of this building and planting and building and planting and building and planting was like a farm. And that's one thing you need to realize. In this life, you are a farmer. And God's entrusted to you this plot of land. And you get to pick what you're going to plant. Some folks want to do just fast food. That's like perennial flowers. They bloom in a week and they're gone next week. But man, they look good for when they were there. Now you got to replant. Now you got to go out and buy more. The next thing is maybe shrubs. They'll stick around, but there's not much you can do it, but they look kind of pretty. Next layer, citrus trees. Citrus trees you can finally eat, but most will build something that they can just consume themselves. I built a company, I built a brand, and now I'm just using it to take care of my own food and to keep our family alive. Very few ever graduate beyond the citrus trees. Very few ever build wineries. Very few ever take a company and turn it into something greater than a company. And that's what I started to realize. I have to think like a 50, 60-year-old, and I have to imagine myself at the end of my life and work my way backwards to where I am now and realize that if I'm going to build this really big company, how am I going to build this company, become successful? That's going to have to be done where I duplicate myself and I have to start creating passive income. So during that time, though, we do need to realize that, yes, the company is going, but that's when I dove, right after the divorce, I dove quickly into therapy. I had to disarm the bomb. I had to disarm the PTSD, the rogue waves, the aftershocks, because I realized they were going to continue to echo if I didn't deal with them. And I did not want to repeat the same marriage, and I didn't want to become my parents. So I said, I'm going to do self-induced. I'm going to walk in the door, turn myself in, because I became so self-consumed on my own ego and business and founding my identity in all the wrong places. Wanted to return to my own relationship with God based on my terms. And that's when I found my mentor, Dave Carter, my mentor, Bob Shank. And these are men that God sent in my life as surrogate fathers that were willing to see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. And they saw the future me. And they were willing to take everything that they knew and download it into my heart. But it wasn't easy. And I've never been out of it. Therapy is a mandatory thing in my life. And it's paid massive dividends. So you got to look at the 20s essentially as the years of investing, building the farm, building the system, building the ecosystem, while at the same time dismantling myself and fully rebuilding myself personally. So when it came to specifically doing the actual art and how I built the company, I had many different forms, and here's what it looked like. I didn't limit myself to one. So if you're thinking, oh, I got to be on one, date all of them. Smartest thing that you can do. Date all of your passions and get them out of your system, because you don't know which one is going to hit. There's a wonderful verse in the Bible that says, cast all your bread upon the waters, because you don't know which one's going to bring a return. So like that farming analogy that I said, is you're planting all these rows and you're seeing which ones are going to yield. I also realize that as a creative, the smartest thing that I can do, any creative can do, and what I teach is be as diverse as possible, because creativity is it goes like this. It ebbs and flows depending on seasons, trends, economies, you name it. But I like having options, and you got to look at it as like you're an investor. So what I did is I said, okay, I airbrush. I taught myself airbrush. I'm going to teach classes on airbrushing, revenue. I'm going to do art, meaning one-of-a-kind murals, helmets, race cars, all the cars for Alpine Electronics, the Fast and Furious cars. Like, so there's an automotive world that I was tied into. I would go to trade shows like at SEMA. I would go to art shows, meaning like industry shows, and I would paint on the floor, meaning I would stand in a booth, represent a product. I would get endorsements from airbrush companies, projector companies, paper companies, started my own canvas line. I mean, dude, you got to see it's like hands on everything. I'm like, no, I'm not going to hope that somebody picks me. I'm going to actually be like, and I was inspired. How can I be a Walt Disney? How can I be a Ralph Lauren? How can I be a Martha Stewart? How can I be an Oprah? How can I be? It was like, if you're gonna be a brand, you have to walk, talk, and act like one. And you have to start to think, what makes brands? What makes brands isn't just one thing. It's typically like a conglomerate of many initiatives that all the parts make up the sum total. And so what I did was I kept doing all the work for hire, as you would call it. You know, album covers, backdrops for major bands. I would go into Hollywood. I would literally paint sets for CBS television, tattoos, David Beckham, temporary tattoos, Pink's sleeves in her music videos, Motorola tattoo, Motorola phones, for their commercial. I was doing it all. And I kind of became known as this like customized, specialized guy that did all this stuff, and that they would hire me to come do this. And what's really bizarre is I think about it back then, it was like pagers and like phone calls. Like, it's crazy how that all happened. But this is where I had to start to make a defining point as I got really close to like really wanting to build it to the next level and really go big. It wasn't big yet, and I didn't know that. I thought it was, but it was the cycle of making money while you sleep. And how is that possible? So airbrushing was the starting point, but then it grew into the point where I then went into design. I'm creating campaigns for Lexus and Toyota and Scion. I'm doing ad campaigns. Now we're becoming an agency. We're doing logos. We're doing branding. We're doing messaging. We're doing websites, because the web came out. The internet came out and it was like, oh, this is a whole new blank canvas. And I can help take people's vision, and I can take what's in their mind and in their brand and the needs that they have in their brand, and I can help them market it, and I can help them tell a great story, and I can help them look really good while doing it. So whether it was package design, corporate identity, stationery, I brokered print jobs. I mean, I've done it all. Let's say if a person walks in, you do a tattoo, they leave, you might not ever see them again. Good tattoo artists get it to where it's like, no, you're doing my whole body. You could think over the course of their life, you're probably going to get about 20 grand for investing in their time with, on their body. For me, I had to realize one of the practical keys and steps for getting sales, keeping sales, and continuing to get this ecosystem going was a few things. One, no matter where I went and who I was around, I had to make sure that they knew of my brand. I had my name on the back of my car everywhere I went. Everyone in Orange County knew the car, knew the logo, knew the brand. Acted like a brand, packaged like a brand. You're a brand. I stopped looking at, here's the next key, stop looking at myself as a work for hire, independent contractor, kind of like just some hired gun. No, a brand doesn't operate that way. A brand is perceived by what it makes known. So what is that? That's my responsibility to make known to everybody on my website and everybody I come in contact with, here's who I am, here's what I do, and here's exactly how I do it. Most of the time, the reason why people don't get hired and get more return customers is because we weren't even aware of what you do, right? For me, I'm always letting people know. It's like, dude, I just did this mural, I just did this package design. So I was sending out to my current email list, like, dude, he just did this stuff with Lexus, and then he just did this stuff with the Fast and Furious, and he just did this stuff with MTV. They're not going to know unless you say it. That then goes to the key point of number 3, self-promotion. Self-promotion is not it's your brand promotion. Here it is. And the way that I get over that, it's not ego. It's not about you. What it is you're saying, I know you've got needs and problems, and I have the solutions. And if I really do care about you, I'm going to make known this solution. If I know I have the cure for the cancer of the soul, I'm going to take Fear Hunter's book and go, dude, you need this book. You're not going to know unless I tell you. You're not going to know unless I do an ad. You're not going to know unless I go make it to the world. But most people are like, oh, no, I don't want to come across like, dude, you're an idiot. If you really do love these people, this community, the folks that you're doing with, stepping out on stage isn't about public speaking. Stepping out on stage is saying, I've got the answers that I know you're looking for. Let me help you get to that well and drink from it as soon as possible. So self-promotion, being the brand, right? Getting sales, getting in front of people. When it comes to visual art, the smartest thing that you can do is to share, which is a really wonderful strategy. People love seeing things get made. They'll stand and watch forever. Example, if I'm at a trade show, typically I won't sit and just hang out. Typically what I do is I put it on display and I actually do a live demonstration. Why? Because everybody's like, dude, what's he doing? And they come in and it breaks down the wall and they're like, so tell me, dude, how are you doing this? And like, so what else do you paint? It's like, could you paint my car? You're like, dude, that's what I do. Check out my book. Here's my portfolio. Here's what I've done. And that's how it started. And that's how you're making known what it is you have done, what you can do. And it breaks down those barriers, but you're getting yourself out in front of people. I did things like this. I went up to the Fox Theater for the release of the Batman premiere. I'm going to paint live. Why? There's 3,000 people in line. I painted, Danny DeVito's face and from he's the Penguin and then Michelle Pfeiffer is the Catwoman and all that. And I put all that up. Well, guess who comes walking by? Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. I'm like, dude, opportunity. They're in the movie, went bought a disposable camera. This could be an opportunity. I might look like a fool, don't care. But this is a self-promotion opportunity that fireworks could go off. But let me just give them to them and see if they'll do a photo. They come walking out. I follow them across the street. Meanwhile, I didn't know there's 3,000 people watching this go down. Meet them at their car. I'm like, Tom, not bothering you, dude, but I would just love to get a picture with you. I'd love to give you these as a gift. He's like, are you kidding me, dude? This is perfect. It's her birthday. So Nicole comes jumping out of the car, comes over, and he's like, let's take pictures. And I'm like, hi, Nicole Kidman. And hi, Tom Cruise. And like, it was wild, right? But the thing about that is I'm proud of that kid. When I look at myself back then, this young 20-year-old punk, right? Who's just trying to make this thing work. You took the courage, you took the guts, you went out, made yourself look like a fool, stood on a sidewalk, humbled yourself and painted some t-shirts to get in front of people and hand out business cards. But that's the thing. I died on a hill for it. I saw the bigger picture. I realized, dude, the ones that really do well are the folks that are prepared for when opportunity shows up. And I believed that if I wanted God to bless my business, the smartest thing that I could do is always be in a position of being prepared and ready for when it does show up so that we can crush it. And what really seemed to work well between me and God was, I'm going to get ready. It doesn't make sense. It's almost like I'm going to build the ark and it might not rain for 150 years, right? But I'm going to faithfully he can find me trustworthy with his assets of creativity he gave me. And I'm gonna go as big and hard as I possibly can go, look for every opportunity to promote, build the brand, make people, let them know what I have to offer. And that got me more sales, got me more opportunities, more sales, more opportunity, more sales. Next thing I know, phone starts ringing. And the phone kept ringing. And whether I was doing murals and package design and sunglass companies and trade shows. You're out and about and you're everywhere. Tattoo conventions, and this is the big one for me, was the moment I started to go into publishing, which you'll hear about. That's the biggest game changer. That's when I started thinking, okay, there's Weiland, there's Thomas Kincaid, there's these artists that have built these multi-million-dollar brands. I believe I can do that, and I have more to offer, because I had to make a decision that I wasn't just going to paint for one type of person. I realized, and this was a big one for me, I realized that I was a diverse creative. One of the ways you can get sales is this. If, Thomas Kincaid, for example, he paints nothing but cottages, scenery, landscapes. I wanted to paint for multiple lifestyles. I wanted to go to enthusiast markets. I wanted to find people where there was cultures within a collector base. So that looked like, I'm going to do wine. A lot of people like wine. I'm going to do mermaids, fairies, angels. I'm going to paint people's stories doing the kid in me, where I take what you wanted to be when you grow up, create that into a story. There's a market for that. Occupations. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be like a ballerina. I can paint people's stories. So I started to diversify my portfolio in the farm, right? Of going, if I make one image, an asset, which is art, and I sell it thousands of times over the course of my lifetime, this will be $1 million business. We will crack that code. Because I was hitting a ceiling complexity of I'm making sales. I've learned a system to make sales. And that was before social media. But I'm making sales, but I realized if I really want to make insane sales, we got to mature the brand. And I then realized I thought I was hitting the summit. I was nowhere close. There was way farther to go.